In today's episode, a continuation of the conversation from last time leads us down a path thinking about rupture and repair, love of others, and love of self. It's a great prep for Tu B'Av, the Jewish holiday of love.
This is Jews Talk Racial Justice with April and Tracie,
a weekly show hosted by April Baskin and Tracie Guy Decker.
In a complex world, change takes courage.
Wholehearted relationships can keep us accountable.
The holiday of love is upon us. Tu B'Av. Yes, we are in the season of Tu B'Av, as we spoke about on our heavier episode last week when we were discussing Tish B'Av. And word on the street, and by street I mean Facebook, and also through our conversations, is that you have some additional insight from your mindful and thoughtful observance of Tish B'Av that sets us up well to discuss Tu B'Av. So perhaps we can start there, Tracie.
Yeah, great. Thank you, April. After our conversation in the last episode, I decided that I wanted to be more mindful and think a little bit more about Tish B'Av, which I had been more or less neglecting because it mourned the loss of the temples, and I have no desire to return to sacrificial worship in a temple. But our last conversation really had me thinking more deeply. And so I reread the chapter in Alan Liu's book, This is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared, which is his book about the whole season from Tish B'Av through Yom Kippur and beyond. Anyway, Alan Liu's insight that kind of made everything fall into place a little bit more cleanly from what we had talked about last time was that part of the magnitude of the grief at the destruction of the temples is that the temple was the physical place where God could manifest, where God could dwell among us. And so when it was destroyed, it was a rupture of our relationship with God. And thinking about it that way, really just changed things for me and made me realize that I'd been being a little bit intellectually lazy by sort of saying well, that's where the sacrifices happened and I don't want to have sacrifices. So I'm not going to pay attention. Mm-hmm. There's always a deeper meaning. There's always more. And so that Alan Liu's insight was really, really kind of illuminating for me, especially in the context of our last conversation, because April, you laid out that the three key components of Jewish life and liberation are Tish B'Av with grieving and mourning, Tu B'Av with the love, and the addition of Teshuvah and Tikkun. And Liu talks about how with the destruction of the temple and the mourning, there was the sense that we had to do Teshuvah and Tikkun in order to restore the relationship with the divine and get back to it, return to it. And so putting that in just how cleanly, that's the wrong word, how resonant Liu's insights were with what we had just been talking about, and then even deeper by thinking about the ways in which the divine factors into the arc that you were tracing last time. It really resonated for me, and I wanted to share that with you, and also have that help inform our conversation about Tu B'Av for today's episode.
Yeah, and I'm a little to clarify something. I think I was saying that I think I could sum up what it is to be Jewish in Teshuvah, Tikkun, and did I also mention pursuit of justice, or no? Was it just?
I don't.
And when you're saying the way you said, I think you just said it differently than how I would say it, and that's sort of the arc between the dance between Tish B'Av and Tu B'Av. That's what you're saying to me, that there's a big part of that is a deep part of the Jewish experience.
Yeah, the way I received what you said in our last episode was that pursuit of Teshuvah and Tikkun the Tikkun in particular is a part of this pursuit of justice, and that piece is essential, but the grief and the love, and then that Teshuvah Tikkun, which is a part and parcel of tzedek tirdof, the justice you will pursue.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I received what you said.
And this is just interesting. And this is why we make a great partnership, because a number of the things you said, they in part were, I think, mostly things that were already a part of what I was thinking. But I like how you're able to disaggregate. Like a number of things just sort of happen intuitively for me. And I don't always speak them, but I know them. And so as you were talking, I was having this little bit of a weird experience of like, but isn't that what we spoke? And then I was like, no, but we didn't explicit, or
Right.
we did, but we didn't maybe fully carry it through. I don't know. You know what I mean? But it was just interesting for me, the component about the presence of the divine and where the presence of the divine is in that arc of that journey from Tish B'Av to Tu B'Av.
Yeah, I don't think that we did talk about it explicitly. And with Tu B'Av, I think it makes intuitive sense to me that the divine is a part of it, because the divine is a part of everything. But at least the way that the holiday has been talked about in recent years, which apparently since our last episode, I did very, very cursory research. Apparently we aren't the only ones who weren't talking about it, because it was specifically a matchmaking holiday in the Second Temple period. And so it wasn't much, there was not much of an observance among any Jewish communities for, centuries. But with the reestablishment of the state of Israel, it's become something that we're talking about more now. And in fact, even we talked last time about it being like the Jewish Valentine's Day. In the couple of websites that I looked at, that was, again, it's kind of like Valentine's Day in English speaking worlds is the way that it's being described, even in Jewish learning.
More traditional.
Yeah.
Sources.
So that was, anyway, sorry, I got distracted. Valentine's Day always distracts me.
Your birthday.
What I was getting at is that the holiday was originated as a day of joy, specifically celebrating love between humans, like between individuals, and romantic love in particular. But that, for me at least, the presence of the divine within that love relationship between humans is always there, whether or not stated explicitly. But I'm stating it explicitly.
Yeah, I'm in a really deep, intense space energetically right now.
I can tell.
So, and I'm like, do I want to bring that into the how much of that do I want to bring into the podcast? So, based upon things I've been learning and how I'm thinking about different things, to me, there is this arc around the relationship collectively and individually that a people or that one has with the divine. And in terms of the human experience, that when people experience immense loss, there's often a rupture in the sense of connection to the divine, because our nervous system and our spirit is experiencing something that certainly our mind and our nervous system is experiencing something that's oftentimes beyond its capacity to hold in the present moment. And that can often lead to a rupture in a sense of wholeness and a sense of connection in understanding if and where love is in our lives. That grief and immense loss or trauma can be so disorienting. And, to me, a core part of the teshuvah process is noticing that even in the midst of that rupture, love and divine energy are still available for us as we are ready, as we heal, and as we are ready to re-encounter it and reintegrate it from a place of having hopefully and or not healed the wounds that the trauma or significant loss inflicted. From different sources I've read from different mystical traditions, there's often a sense that that's a huge part of the human experience, or the experience on this planet, is navigating lessons around connection and disconnection and love and loss of love and depending upon one's spiritual journey or where they're going, which is what I'm in the, or like, for instance, for me on my journey is noticing that love is always there, but my capacity to perceive it and that for me, healing is a core part in helping me re-encounter and not only access it, but often access it from a more potent places, which is where I start to get into the realm of joy, and how what I understand joy to be, where there's like a simple, pure, sweet, innocent joy. And then there is the rugged, beautiful, even more powerful gem of how I like to think of joy that is on the other side of rupture and teshuva / healing and repair, and seeing how beautiful something is, and then at its higher levels, really savoring it once one has gone through enough journeys and assembled enough resources around them that they are now aware that where there isn't much foreboding joy, because I've developed enough spiritual infrastructure, both in terms of relationships as well as different practices, like a number of the ones we teach in the context of grounded and growing, that I can actually just enjoy it. And I recognize that chaos theory is alive and well, and that the very nature of human existence is going to be that continual dynamic, but understanding more deeply that the divine is always with me, and me holding this dualistic experience of recognizing my understanding of the divine beyond time and space, and also holding my very much time-space reality in this flesh meat suit, and being a human on this world, and holding both of those pieces. And that divine perspective is very helpful for me. And that's part of how I hold the dual experience, because in this moment as a human, I am experiencing immense loss. And from having gone through that journey repeatedly in different ways over time, and being blessed in the worst of circumstances to have healthy resources around me to help me, and me, for whatever reason, being willing to trust in that, go through a teshuva process.
What's coming up for me is this metaphor. I'll just share it. I think maybe we've spoken on the podcast before about kintsugi, which is a Japanese form of mending pottery with resin and gold.
It's so weird, because as I was talking earlier, like a few minutes ago, I saw that in my mind's eye, and I think I was perceiving that was coming up for you.
Yeah,
anyway,
it was
continue.
Really like powerfully coming up for me.
I felt it.
When I studied kintsugi a couple of years ago, I read something. I read a few things about it.
Learned about
it.
But
one of the stories that like really stuck with me was this story from, I don't remember the time period, but it's not a modern day story. So sometime, pre 19th century in Japan, a wealthy man had purchased this Ming vase, or some, very expensive and very precious Chinese vase. This is a Japanese man had purchased this Chinese vase and shared it with someone who was maybe a monk or a martial artist. I don't remember, but some luminary who the rich guy was trying to impress. And this monk was like, it's nice. And the rich guy was so disappointed, like he'd spent all this money and like he wasn't getting the status that he wanted. And then over the course of some time, the vase was broken and repaired via kintsugi, and the luminary came upon it again, like came to the man's house again for whatever reason, was like, oh, it's stunning. It was like, he was blown away now by how magnificent this piece of pottery was, now that it had been broken and repaired. And so for those who don't know, the kintsugi process uses this natural resin that comes from some sort of tree sap, and then has gold dust in it. And it takes a very long time to do it properly, because it's layer upon layer upon layer. And what you're left with is a gold scar. So like a precious metal scar in the broken pottery. And it is absolutely gorgeous. The aesthetic of it is what made me pursue, learn about it in the first place. And the metaphor tracks so beautifully to what you were describing, April, about the joy on the other side of the brokenness and the healing being so much more powerful and resonant and deep than on the pre-breakage side. It just feels so completely resonant with what you were describing. And I was thinking similarly about the ways in which my life and spirit and mind are deepened and more powerful and more clear after heartbreak, right? How in some ways, I mean, I'm sure I've told this story before. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but it was heartbreak that set me on my racial justice path self-consciously. Mm-hmm. It was heartbreak that allowed me to, become who I am. Mm-hmm. So what you're talking about, right? What you were talking about the joy on the other side and the where you land with the power of teshuva and tikkun is deeply, deeply resonating with me. And the love that is on the other side of the breakage and repair is deeper and more powerful and richer. That is deeply resonating with my experience.
Yeah. And I believe it's possible, and this is where I live from, that it's absolutely possible and necessary for us to continue to powerfully work for collective liberation and notice the parts of our living that at this point I really believe for the most part use any, I'm not welcoming that in. I would love for there to be more ease, but I can leverage anything for good in partnership with counselors and supports and different resources that I have. It's not, but that I have everything I need to navigate those things. And what's coming up that I want to articulate is I believe that healthy adversity and or normal different life experiences, that even when we've reached collective liberation, that a core part of being human is ideally getting support and resourcing around and learning through various forms of suffering and coming out on the other side and being able to re-relate to divinity as it manifests in the forms of love and joy and creativity and peace, and noticing that that is always there, because that arc, that hero's or Shiro's journey is really potent. And I never want that to be conflated with, even though I have used horrific instances in my life to get stronger and to leverage it for good, I also don't want to conflate those things and in any way justify abuse or wrongdoing, because just in our living alone with different things that happen, there's still plenty of natural, more healthy / unavoidable adversity that can happen. And I notice at times, and I've continued to refine this and notice this as I've gotten stronger and more resilient and more perceptive, and being aware that the experiences that I had are what guided me here, while also being aware that I could have had those experiences in other ways that didn't involve the unnecessary suffering of myself or loved ones because of systemic oppression. And the other piece that I wanted to speak to a bit, or that came up for me, is related to some like co-creation / manifestation stuff that was triggered as you were talking, Tracie, that I've heard about and I experienced for myself prior to and when I met Asan. And I was like, oh, this teaching really does apply. It's not quite as simple as we can only experience love at the level that we love ourselves, or experience love, although I do think that's true to an extent. But I also think that statement alone doesn't account for the fact that being loved can also have a healing, transformative impact that can also elevate us. But I think the challenge is at times people put too much power in that, attribute too much power in that, but that the point at which I found Asan, and I'd been looking at it, kind of given up on that piece, which is also good spiritually in some ways because I was releasing my resistance, the struggle that I had around it. I was just kind of accepting where things were, and I was regularly savoring life and cultivating joy and finding moments of joy and love throughout my day, listening to music that I loved and really feeling into it as I was cleaning the kitchen or doing things and just cultivating that feeling of love regularly. Yeah. There's so much more I want to say about this, and I feel like, as we know, that I'm still figuring out, if there is anyone at all, like what container or context I'm putting this in. But I'm just practicing sharing some of these thoughts right now. So normally part of me wants to like now wrap it in a pretty bow or something, but I suppose I can just also turn to you and let you respond to it and engage in our normal collaborative co-creative process, and that'll take care of itself.
You know, when you were talking about you can only love others to the extent that you can love yourself, and how that's kind of an incomplete picture, the image that came up to me was sort of a feedback loop and a virtuous circle, which then I think you're talking about, like when you met Asan and where you were, and then what that made possible, but then also reinforced as the two of you got to know one another, and that virtuous cycle kind of continued to, or that feedback loop continued to vibrate higher, as you say. I think I used that accurately.
And remain consistent, because it was already pretty high, but remain consistent. And here's the other thing, that the reason why that initial statement that I said, that I think that statement applies with the Jewish community. Like I really believe a big part of why Jews don't treat different newcomers well is because of their own unhealed hurt and suffering, or their inability to fully and deeply love and accept themselves.
That resonates. Like was it Mark Twain who said, "I don't want to be a member of any club that would have me"?
Yeah, I think it was Groucho Marx or something. I think it was like one of the Three Stooges. Yeah,
Groucho Marx. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I really
who was Jewish. Groucho Marx, who was Jewish.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think it was a very Jewish comment. And as someone who has engaged in a variety of creative, leading edge programs for 20 years, about 7 years or so ago, I started to notice, I don't fully know what it looks like, but I actually think the focus here is wrong, because I think we're not actually getting to the root cause of this. And that is part of it. And just even like a lot of Jews aren't even happy. Like even if you took away some of the reasons different Jews or different Jewish communal perspectives blame for their unhappiness, most Jews would still be unhappy. Like if intermarriage were gone, if Jews of color weren't around, like if white Ashkenazi Jews were just left with themselves and all of their trauma and all of their conditional white status, and being stuck in this in-between interstitial crappy place of being accepted and not being accepted, but being treated better than most other people of color, but still not fully being included, while still carrying all of this unhealed trauma, there would still be perpetual challenges and discontentment. And so that's part of the reason why I love healing so much, is because it helps everyone and gets to some of the root causes. Because yes, like people hurting other people is a thing, but the reason why that's happening is because of different systemic challenges and unhealed pain that needs to get resolved foundationally, that will then farther down the stream take care of all these other things.
Applying that, you have to love yourself, to the Jewish community is really, I'm gonna be sitting with that for a little while, April. Like it's the difference.
I used to say it in some Divrei Torah. Nobody said anything, but I still knew it was clear. Like they didn't react either, but they also didn't deny it. But I think they were also like, well, what do we do with that?
It's the difference between like, hey, you want to hang with us? Of course you want to hang with us. Come hang with us. And why would you want to hang with us?
I barely know why I want to be here anyway.
Why would you if you don't have to? If you don't have to be here, why would you? Like, right, the difference between those
people,
two.
Right. And people literally say that. Like, they're literally like, I don't get why you would want to be with me. And for so many folks like me, it's because I'm like, because I clearly see what you don't, that you're amazing and funny and fun.
I have said that I have said, like,
many people do.
Why would you choose this?
Right. And so like that. So like,
that's hitting me right in the feels, April. I'm laughing because it's
Thank you. I'm glad, because I've been saying this, but I don't say it very much because it didn't get much of a response, because I think it was like a classic projector thing of me not being invited and people not being ready to hear what they weren't ready to hear. But it also wasn't resistant, but I also didn't get a lot of like, it just was, I think it was really disarming, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, like not with this. Yeah. Like people would just, because I think it was true and people on some level knew it was true, but we're like, it gets to the very crux. And so, it's interesting for us to think about it in the context of our joyous justice, our work more broadly. And I think with Grounded and Growing and certain programs we're doing in different initiatives we may roll out in the future, it's getting to the heart of this. Because to me, that's at the heart of it. Is it's really hard to have loving, vibrant relationships and communities when we are still carrying the rupture and lack of teshuvah, of healing, of being able to return to our inherent divinity and recognition that we are whole and beautiful and wonderful. So I wanted this to potentially be more upbeat since it's Tish B'Av. So I'm going to have us, so I both want to invite people to just sit with that and marinate in that if you're vibing with that. And also I'd also be happy to toss out some different pieces to practice, to like share some of what I already shared, but share what it looks like to practice savoring love. What were you going to say, Tracie?
Well, I was just, once again, the prophet Lauryn Hill was coming up for me.
Same for me.
How you gonna win when you ain't right within? And so now I'm thinking about my Tish B'Av practice. And I was thinking about the power of as if, which I don't know if we've talked about on the podcast before, but I talk about a lot in our programs. Like a long time ago, I was like, I just don't know if there's really a personality out there, this divine personality that can respond to me, but I'm just going to proceed as if there were, because my life is better when I do. And so I was thinking about as if.
Perfect.
And self-love.
That's how I got started on this path too.
And, like, so instead of like, why would you want to hang out with me? I'm going to just practice trying on as if folks want to hang out with me. Right.
Yes.
And folks want to be in relationship. And that's going to be my Tish B'Av self-love.
That is a wonderful healing direction.
Is to try on that as if.
Yes, I love it. And that's actually I had a similar thought. And now, I really, and I'm not even attached to it, but I deeply believe a number of these mystical things. But I started out in a similar place. I didn't think as if, but I thought, can I also make a logical case for this? Which I can. Like me thinking this way, if this is in service, if this serves me and it helps me achieve these things, like in terms of like law of attraction or co-creation or bringing things my way, like I don't know if I believe that, but it also makes sense to me that if I train my mind to notice things, I'll more easily notice things. So either way, this seems helpful. And then after doing it for a number of years and having all kinds of really amazing things that other people from the outside, not knowing that was my practice, being like, what, how did that happen? I started to be like, yeah, this is just beyond just my mind alone. And it's repeating, so wanting to like add in something, but I feel like maybe we can also just let it be what it is. But I feel like I'm wanting to put a bow on this in some way or something like.
Okay, here's where I am. The bow is imagine what wonderful things will come. That's the bow for me. Like I'm thinking about past experiences where I was sure that this person that I thought was pretty cool, like wasn't. I'm not even talking about romantic. I'm talking about like platonic friendship. And like finally the person, she was like, Tracie, I'm trying to be your friend. Can we get together, please? And I was like, oh, you are? Yeah. Okay. And imagine if I had that as if then like she and I would have been hanging out months and months earlier. So imagine what wonderful things will come is the bow, I think, on this Tish B'Av suggestion.
Yes, I wonder what wonderful things will come if I'm willing to act as if that people perceive me as lovable and worthy of allyship and adventures and powerful, loving collaboration, whether romantically, professionally, or in the context of movement building work. Thank you. That's perfect, Tracie.
I love it.
I love you.
I love you too.
And we love you. Wonderful listener. Thanks for tuning in. Our show's theme music was composed by Elliot Hammer. You can find this track and other beats on Instagram at Elliot Hammer. If this episode resonated with you, please share it and subscribe. To join the conversation, visit JewsTalkRacialJustice.com, where you can send us a question or suggestion, access our show notes, and learn more about our team. Take care until next time, and stay humble and keep going.